Welcome back to your Systems Change course. My name is Florentine Roth, and in this module we will focus on analyzing the system you chose, as well as finding your targeted systems change in it. In your final strategy deck in your workbook, this will be useful for filling in your 5R framework in its status quo and its target state. It will also support you in formulating your targeted systems change statement, which will serve as your North Star through the rest of the strategy process. Let's look at where we are in the journey. We concluded the last session by identifying several root causes to the big problem, the roots of our hurt tree, and formulating systems that are behind each root cause. You selected one root that needs nurturing, a system that you want to focus on. In this module, we will zoom into the selected root of the tree and, through careful analysis and iteration based on feedback, improve its conditions so that the tree can flourish. The goal is to understand the different ways the root can be healthier. For example, the root finds a new place in the earth, gets disentangled from another root, or is being freed from parasites. Based on this analysis, we decide which of the alternatives is the most effective and suitable targeted change. At this point in your strategy development process, we must be careful about negative unintended consequences. Could one root finding a new place harm another root of the same tree or a neighboring tree? Could this one root disturb the overall network of the tree community? Could removing parasites in one root lead to a different disease somewhere else? For this, make sure to keep Module 2's root cause analysis in mind, where you depicted how different subsystems are connected under one big problem. In Albina's case, for instance, she envisioned a positive change in the waste collection system in Peru. That, however, also meant that getting much more waste collected would lower the price of recyclable waste, which could then backfire on boosting increasing amounts of waste being collected in the first place. Being aware of this potential negative consequence, she conducted risk management by working with the government to encourage companies to process waste within Peru, as opposed to having all recyclable waste being exported. That is, because exported it was being sold by ton at a lower price than processed nationally. We have already briefly explored what a system is. Let's refresh our memory. We know that each system consists of elements that have an interconnection and together serve a common purpose. We call those elements roles, relationships, and results. Additionally, any system has resources that feed it and rules that define its behavior of the process of transforming resources into results. All these R's can be both positive and negative in nature. Together, these 5 R's capture the basic dynamics of a system. They also point at different leverage points to improve or change the system. There's a nice framework called 5R developed by USAID to support the system visualization process. We will use this 5R tool with a slight adaptation by Ashoka to better serve our purposes. Before we provide a detailed step-by-step guidance on it, let's get a bird's-eye perspective on how it works. We will do this exercise in 2 phases. Phase 1 is about defining the status quo of the system, and Phase 2 is about defining the target state of the system, meaning the desired state of the system. Feel free to already do the exercise in the workbook alongside this video. Otherwise, listen carefully and apply the step-by-step guidance after you have watched the video. Let's start with Phase 1, the status quo of the system. In step 1 of Phase 1, we start by clearly articulating the title of the system that we will work on and its boundaries and relative size. In step 2, we discuss which results the current identified system produces. In step 3, we identify other R's of the current system, the resources, roles, relationships, and rules needed to explain the results outlined before. Once we have more clarity on what our system looks like today, we can proceed to Phase 2, defining the target state of the system. This will require us to, in Step 4, articulate the desired improvement in the system's results, in order to then, in Step 5, build the hypotheses, which elements of the system need to change in order to achieve the desired results. Rarely is there only one option of what can be changed in order to improve results. Our goal is to generate and analyze several options to choose one to focus on. Note that usually no change in one R comes alone. It will usually bring about changes in the other Rs as well. For instance, a change in someone's role will typically bring about a change in the rules, and vice versa. We will also see that in the example of Albina's work, where a change in the role of informal waste pickers comes along with a change in the legal framework around the activities of waste picking. Now, before we dive deeper here and apply the exercise step by step with our example entrepreneur Albina, let's have a more general look at how a system can be analyzed using the 5R tool. For this, we look at other examples of Ashoka fellows in different contexts. First, let's look at the system of electricity production and provision in Germany that has been the center of attention of our German social entrepreneur Ursula Sladek and her colleagues, quickly upon the Chernobyl nuclear power plant catastrophe. The resources that were going into the system back then included coal, gas, and uranium. The financial investments used to come from the corporate side. What the system used to produce was electricity based on the fossil fuel and nuclear power, which significantly affected the environment, led to higher prices for consumers, and their dependence on a few big producers. The system as such did not offer many opportunities for innovation. If we look inside the system, one can say that there have been three major interconnected roles. The energy producer role was played by a few big centralized companies who were selling energy to energy distributors, often affiliated with them. The energy distributors were then selling and delivering energy to consumers, who had no chance to choose the source of the energy they were buying. This setup for relationships has been defined by rules in the system. Key changes that have been achieved throughout years of work of multiple stakeholders include the fact that sun and wind have now also become viable resources for electricity production. Renewable sources today constitute of 1/3 of Germany's overall electricity sources and lower the ecological footprint of the system. This change was enabled by a major change in the roles, relationships, and rules within the system. Energy consumers have gained the right to play the role of energy producers, choose the source of the electricity they consume, and invest in the sources of their choice. This dynamic has unlocked competition and more innovation in the system, as well as improved ecological footprint. In summary, if we put the essence of the system's change into one sentence, we could arrive at something like the following. In the German electricity production and provision system, citizens become energy providers, which is a role change, by owning the means of electricity production and the power grid, which is a relationship change. Here's another example in the fishing industry by Ashoka fellow Al Harris at Blue Ventures. His targeted systems change is that in small-scale fishing communities, fishermen become conservationists, a role change, and regulate themselves, a rule change. Or an example many of you know is Muhammad Yunus, who set up Grameen Bank to show that in private banking sector, social capital can be used as collateral for loans. Here we have a resource change. All of these might sound rather simplistic, but when you boil down the work of these social entrepreneurs to the essential systems changes they helped achieve, you can see how powerful a targeted approach is. Therefore, in this module's exercise, we will use the 5R framework to identify these potential targeted systems changes in your work and ultimately capture your focus in just one targeted systems change sentence. Let's have a more thorough look at how to do this exercise and use our familiar example, our fellow Albina, for every step of it. We start by defining the title or the name of the system. Are we talking about the education system or the health system? Can we be more specific? Can we also define the geographical scope? It is very important as it will give some boundaries. Please remember that you want to avoid unintended negative consequences at this stage, which is why you ideally define a subsystem of which you have sufficient understanding to navigate its complexity. Ideally, the system should be defined as narrowly as possible and as broadly as necessary. As explained in Module 2, our social entrepreneur Albina has formulated the system of her focus as the waste collection system in Peru. This definition is helpful in its specificity and easier to capture in its complexity rather than a broader definition like the waste collection system without any geographical scope, or even broader, the waste management system, which would not only include the collection system, but also the system of waste disposal and waste treatment. On the other hand, the system of waste picking in Peru would be too narrow, as we would exclude key stakeholders like municipalities and neighborhoods from our analysis. Perspective is everything. Choose a slightly different title for the system and a lot can change. If you struggle with naming the system, here's a tip. You can think back at the root of the social problem you chose to focus on and think about the 3 to 4 actors with the most impact in the root cause. Now, think which system includes them all. Now that the name of the system is clear, let's look at the results that it produces in the status quo. What is it that comes out of our system? Results can include specific outcomes. For example, a share of cured patients in the healthcare system or a share of students who have completed higher education. Results can also include economic value and its distribution or new knowledge. You can also mention trends or patterns in the results over time. Make sure you capture diverse results the system is producing and mention both positive and negative ones. Be generous. No system produces only negative results, otherwise it would already have ceased to exist. Lastly, for this specific exercise, focus on the most important results. A good first step is to identify the one outcome that concerns you the most, and 2 others that you don't want to make worse in the process. Coming back to Albina's example, we can say that in the system of waste collection in Peru, only 40% of the waste produced is collected properly, while 60% is dumped illegally in open garbage dumps, in streets, and in vacant lots. The system contributes negatively to a spread of communicable diseases, directly or indirectly through the multiplication of animals like rats, and it deteriorates the quality of urban life. Informal waste pickers find themselves in a circle of poverty and dishonor. A positive trend, however, that can be observed is that waste has an economic value, and that even though there are not many, there are buyers willing to buy recyclable waste. This outcome we don't want to make worse. Let's move to the other R's of the system now and start with resources by asking ourselves, what goes into the system to produce the formulated results? Are there needed resources that are missing or insufficient? Resources can include money, but also knowledge, time, stakeholders, or physical infrastructure. Make sure the resources you list are diverse. Some other questions to consider include, are there trends or patterns in resource inflows? What are the sources of those resources? Are they reliable and secure? Here are the resources that we see flowing into the system of waste collection in Peru. 1,300 metric tons of waste every day. Informal and formal labor around waste collection. Limited funding from public sources. Limited knowledge about waste collection among citizens, companies, and municipalities. Let's move to the roles in our system. Please remember that when describing roles, you're not doing a stakeholder mapping analysis. That means you don't need to write specific names of organizations or people, but rather identify different roles that are played by stakeholders in a system. It is common that one role can be played by multiple stakeholders, but also that one stakeholder can play multiple roles. In our example, the key roles in the system of waste collection in Peru are: there are waste pickers, formal and informal, who actually pick up the waste. This role consists of public waste collectors, private company waste collectors, and informal waste pickers. We, moreover, have municipalities in their role of waste collection authorities, and neighborhoods where waste is being produced. Also, we should look at waste collection centers, who are mostly informal at this point in time. Now we will look at relationships. Relationships include transactions, flows of information, power dynamics, decision-making power, various types of cooperation, and other types of relationships. In our example, the municipal waste collection authorities assign waste collection duties to formal waste pickers, meaning the public waste collectors and the private company waste collectors, not, however, to the big group of informal waste pickers. All waste collection in the neighborhoods is ineffective, leaving 60% of the waste uncollected. Waste collection centers buy the collected waste from public and private waste collectors. Informal waste pickers, instead of being integrated into the municipality's formal waste collection system, operate informally in parallel ways. Some waste collection centers use the state to their benefit and buy waste from waste pickers under precarious conditions. Later in this exercise, we will explore how the role of informal waste pickers and the nature of their relationship with other stakeholders could be different. We will now explore rules in our system. They can, for example, include written rules like laws, regulations, and company policies, but also traditions, traditional practices, people's preferences, prejudices, cultural norms, and other formal and informal rules. In our example, this looks like the following. The responsibility of waste collection is diffuse and fragmented, as there's no national law or regulation. It is the responsibility of each municipality to create a system for themselves. And municipalities are not incentivized to collect or separate waste. Also, there's a general belief held by municipalities that neighborhoods don't have an environmental conscience. They think all people throw trash in the streets and they don't value clean streets. It is now time to put this learning into practice and build your own 5R status quo framework for your strategy. You can find the specific section in your strategy workbook with specific guidelines on how to fill it in. Once you're done with the status quo, you have completed phase 1 of the 5R exercise. Have another look at it with fresh eyes. Does it capture most important elements and dynamics? Invite your team and stakeholders to comment on your model of the system. Here are some tips while you fill in the worksheet. Keep in mind that the point is not to describe the system in all imaginable detail and complexity. The point is to outline the most relevant aspects given the team's particular situation and interests. Remember that all models are wrong, but some models are useful. You don't have to describe the R's in the order we did. Think about it as an iterative process. Move from one category to the next and back and make adjustments in the categories that you already worked on until you arrive at a version that you like. When doing the status quo visualization, make sure that there's a clear logical connection between the resources, rules, roles, and relationships, but also results. Now let's move on to phase 2, that is about formulating the target state of the system. When describing both the status quo and the target, imagine that your social venture has not been founded yet. Forget what you're doing on a daily basis and focus only on the social system that you want to change. Remember that your intended systems change, once established, should not depend on you or your organization. From my experience with social entrepreneurs applying the 5R model, we've seen that teams often want to establish new roles, like new intermediaries that coordinate other roles. This can be a perfectly legitimate systems change, but it's often not the ideal, because it usually requires setting up new organizations that do direct service at high scale and therefore run into limits rather quickly. It's better to change the existing roles and relationships so that they integrate the intermediary or coordination role into the existing functions, which could make an extra coordinating role not needed in the first place. In fact, we find that many fellow systems changes are based on those who are originally perceived as being the problem, ultimately becoming the solution. Think Al Harris, who turns fishermen into conservationists. In step 4, we start by stating which current results of the system need to be improved. You can do so by adding, changing, or removing the formulations of the results in the status quo. So, how could our social entrepreneur Albina change the definition of the results being produced by the existing system of waste collection in Peru? She envisions a system producing the majority of waste being collected efficiently and no incentive to dump waste illegally. Improved health conditions and quality of urban life. Waste picking as a profession for more than 100,000 people that allows for a dignified life and income. And an increased economic value as it becomes an integrated and efficient system. In the final 5th step of the 5R framework, we emphasize changes in roles, relationships, resources, and rules. Albina would like to see waste pickers move from being informal and disconnected from the formal waste collection system to become a central role in a new integrated market. For this, she would like to see the relationship changed between the major roles: municipalities in their role as waste collection authorities, waste pickers, as well as neighborhoods. Municipalities consider formally informal waste pickers, as well as neighborhoods, a viable market and therefore part of an integrated waste collection system. Neighborhoods recognize and value waste pickers in their official role, leading to an effective, selected waste collection between them. In terms of resources, labor that goes into the system is entirely formal, and there's an inflow of funding not only coming from municipalities, but also from neighborhoods who pay for the individualized and efficient waste collection. Also, new knowledge about waste collection is available to all major players in the system. Albina also envisions a change in the rules of the system. There must be a change in the legal framework for waste picking to be officially recognized as a profession. And indeed, a law was passed in 2009 that today regulates the activity of waste pickers. There must also be an incentive mechanism for incentivizing actors across the system to properly manage their waste. This was implemented in 2010 by the Ministry of Economy by creating a financial incentives plan for municipalities to adopt and implement the law. And neighborhoods are considered willing to actively contribute to the environment by becoming part of and paying for waste collection. Once you have explored potential changes in different elements of the system for it to achieve better results, let's clearly articulate your options for targeted systems changes. This is the final part of this exercise. It is about formulating in just one sentence the essence of the key systems change you identified in the 5R framework. It may seem strange to reduce it to just one sentence, but as you already saw in earlier examples of systems changes in the energy, fishing, and banking system, it is perfectly possible. And not only that, by focusing on the essence, we bring clarity to our North Star and complete a key piece in our strategy process. For the rest of the process, you can always come back to this one sentence and evaluate your decisions based on whether they lead to this targeted systems change. It's the simple yet highly systemic piece of the process that links your ambitious big problem with a more tangible and achievable systems change. When we formulate this targeted systems change sentence, they roughly follow the same format. Let's have a look. This scheme can help you produce succinct statements. In the system X, there is a need to add, change, or get rid of one of the R elements. Then you can specify the change. This will lead to improved results in the system. In Albina's example, the sentence will be the following. There's a need to change a role and its relationships. Waste pickers move from being informal and disconnected from the waste collection system to a formal integrated role in the formal system. If we want to unfold it a bit more, we specify. For this, all existing actors within the waste collection system move from parallel activities to one integrated market. And what would be the result? This would eventually lead to the majority of waste in Peru being collected. Waste pickers to live dignified lives, which contributes to a healthier society and a higher quality of urban life. Please see many other examples of targeted systems changes in the worksheets. Also, please have a look at our video introducing additional examples. We can only encourage you to make use of the system visualization, helping you identify multiple potential systemic changes to consider several options for a targeted systems change. This ensures that you're not pre-programmed on one specific solution and are openly exploring alternatives. The idea is for you to analyze, compare several options for targeted systems changes so that you can make an informed choice that is both most effective for achieving the desired change in results and most feasible for you. Here are a few questions you can ask yourself when comparing potential systems changes, making this choice. Give your answers on the scale from 1 to 5, 5 being the maximum. How beneficial is the systems change in terms of improved health and outcomes of the system compared to other potential targeted systems changes? Remember, a healthy system is not dependent on a single organization like yours. How easy is it to achieve the systems change in terms of time and effort needed and risks involved? Give more points if it is easier and fewer points if the required efforts and risks are high. To what extent can you use the unique strengths and assets of your venture and leadership to promote this goal? Does the goal align with your personal values and motivations and those of your venture? To which extent does the system require your intervention? Give more points if nobody else is working on the systems change, and fewer points if there are other significant players doing good work here. Have a look at the potential systems change with the highest score. This is likely to be your first candidate. If you don't feel comfortable with this choice, use the answers to the question as the foundation for your choice, but disregard the total grades. Please remember that there are many options for how elements of the system could be improved. The point is not to tackle them all at once and design a perfect system. The point is to identify a feasible yet highly impactful systems change that would give you the improved results that you and your team want to achieve. Now it's time for you to turn to the workbook. Visualize the target state of your system. Which R needs to change for the desired results to be achieved? What is your targeted systems change statement based on these changes? There's a detailed checklist and guidelines for this exercise in the workbook. Please use it to make sure you don't miss anything important. Some final practical tips for this exercise. Remember to add data where possible along the way. This helps to strengthen your systems analysis and to confirm the importance of your points made to other stakeholders as well. We strongly recommend that you do this exercise together with your team and other stakeholders. As we have stated earlier, systems change can rarely be achieved by the efforts of one organization. This is why it's so important that you engage your future allies and take their perspective into consideration as early as possible in your strategy development process. Keep it simple. The goal is to gain clarity on the systems change goal, not to describe a system in full detail. In your final document, something close to 4 resources, 5 roles, 7 relationships, 5 rules, and 4 results will ensure that you have not overcomplicated nor oversimplified your analysis. Make sure you don't mention yourself. The venture, its products, and its initiatives should not appear on the systems map. This exercise is not supposed to explain a business or operating model, but the systems change that the team wants to achieve. This is the end of Module 3. Congratulations on finalizing it and crafting your 5R model, as well as defining your targeted systems change, the North Star of your strategy development process. In the next module, in Module 4, we will look closer into telling the story of how you want to achieve your targeted systems change. Thank you for watching. We look forward to welcoming you again in our next module.